random stream, in all fairness. I'm a bit bored on this Sunday night. Pretty much been playing most of the afternoon Call of Duty. Caught into watching some Memphis wrestling as well. Love Memphis wrestling. Comes out of Hollywood Championship Wrestling United Network or something along the lines of that. It's always a great event to watch, and all that. Each show weekly, it was great. It's great to watch. Yeah, so what do I want to talk about on a Sunday night? What do I want to talk about on a Sunday night? I want to talk about celebrities and professional wrestling. And I think it's a good one to talk about because we're in a time period where we're seeing a major crossover, a multiverse in a kind of way of pop culture and pro wrestling. And it's always been there. It's not a new Pacific thing. I mean, if we think about historically some of the earliest ones, you're looking at Andy Kaufman and Jerry the King Lawler. Andy Kaufman, stand-up comedian, funny guy, TV personality from the USA, just recently in the WWE Hall of Fame. Did this very staged comedy act of challenging women to wrestling. So, I mean, I think I talked about it a few weeks back. I was talking about intergender wrestling. And he was the first self-claimed intergender world champion. And Jerry the King Lawler got on top of this and sort of like, and that's where that storyline came from. And that's where he acceptably, he was an okay wrestler, but that isn't a new thing. We had Dennis Rodman, NWO, okay, the New World Order, okay. We had, all right, who else did we have? I'm just trying to think. We had Mike Tyson, Stone Cold Steve Austin. We recently in AEW had Shaq and Cody. We had Logan Paul, Bad Bunny. Not forgetting the very forgettable RoboCop, okay, and Sting. RoboCop 2, I believe it was. RoboCop and Sting elements. And, I mean, even, I'm not going to lie, I'm a fan. We had the Muppets. We had the Muppets, Hornswoggle and Jake Hager. I can't remember what his name was back then. But that's always been in professional wrestling, that multiverse crossover links. Okay, but we're seeing it, I think, in WWE an awful lot. We also had the element of gimmicks in professional wrestling. And look, if you know me, you know that I can't find any of the figures. I'm a massive BWO Blue Meanie fan. And we know that the Blue Meanie did great sort of like gimmicky sort of take the piss elements of. They did a great Kiss one. BWO in itself is a take the piss of the NWO, all right. But more celebrities, hip hop celebrities, rappers. We know that rappers love Ric Flair. We know that Snoop Dogg, in a matter of 18 months, was on AEW, did an awful frog splash, and was on WWE. Okay, co-hosting WrestleMania with The Miz, all right, and actually his wrestling ability got a lot better then. But what I'm trying to come to, all right, do you know what? I've just looked at my notes then, and I just thought I've even got more than that. The Rock, Wyclef Jean, that song he did. Okay, we've got Limp Bizkit, Undertaker. There's loads of them. I can go on and on and on. How pop culture, okay, and professional wrestling overlink. I'm looking at the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in front of my face as well. Massive Turtles fan. But there was a Turtles crossover as well at one point. Oh my God, they're coming to me. They're coming to me. There's loads of them. There's absolutely fantastically, amazingly billions of celebrity and pop culture crossovers into professional wrestling. But the one that we want to talk about tonight, the one that I want to talk about that's probably the most influential because they are a cult hip-hop band. A cult hip-hop band. And probably one of my favourite groups. My niece has just said hello there. Hello Mary. Okay, alright. And do you know what? I've even told my nieces to listen to this hip-hop group called Insane Clown Posse. I remember in my tweens and my teens skateboarding around the mean streets of Luton Town, okay, with my sort of like headphones on my noodle, okay, all right, with my Walkman, Sony Walkman because I was a cool kid, okay, All right, I had my Sony Walkman, then my Sony CD. Okay, listening to Insane Clown Posse, thinking I was a cool kid. And the first time I interestingly come across them wasn't at a pirate radio station or seeing them at a gig or anything like that. Interestingly, when I first came across them was in professional wrestling. And it was a specific time period I saw them in professional wrestling. I remember switching the television, and I remember the Headbangers, one of my personal favourite tag teams, okay, beating the living shite out of them, right? And I saw them, and I'm thinking, who are them clown-looking cats? Okay, and they were in the oddities at the time, which later on in life we sort of like think about. The oddities were very underrated, and what they did, very creative, very cool, very fantastic. Okay, and Insane Clown Posse was a slight part of that. But there's a story there, because I remember looking at it and I'm thinking the Headbangers are kicking the living shit out of these guys a little bit too hard. Okay, and actually, from what I'm understanding from listening very recently to a JBL sort of like podcast, Briscoe and JBL's podcast, being interviewing Headbangers, where they said basically Vince McMahon wanted them to do that. And the reason why they wanted him to do that was because the Insane Clown Posse boys went in there with their boots being a bit too high, wanting too much in an industry that isn't theirs. But it is what it is, and that's what happens sometimes. But you know what? That made me interested in them. And you kind of find out from listening to commentary and stuff like that, they were a hip-hop group. And you know what? I liked hip-hop. I liked hip-hop. I'm a white person that likes hip-hop. I'm a white person that likes clowns rapping, okay? And do you know what? Love it to pieces. Everything they did. And I remember where I used to live in a children's home in a place called Dunstable, just outside Luton. If you're a historian, you'll know that I believe Henry VIII married one of his wives there, or something along the lines of that. Hi Lydia, that's my daughter. Okay, Henry VIII married one of his missuses there, or divorced her, or did something there. So if you know your history, that's what Dunstable's famous for. But it's also famous for me personally. I had two shops that I used to love going to. Two shops. One was called Computer Friendly. Was on the high street down the road from Blockbuster. Okay, and I used to go in there and trade my N64 games up. What else? My Sega games up back in the day as well. Yeah, and if anybody wants to know, my favourite ever game for the N64 was Star Wars Pod Racer. Probably the greatest game in history, in my perspective. I've got it on my Switch downstairs. And there was another shop that did records and CDs and stuff like that. And I used to go in there and I used to flick through them all. It's like Empire Records, that movie. Before this is well before downloads and stuff like this at this time period. And I used to flick through the CDs. I used to flick through the vinyls. I used to flick through the tapes. And do you know what I mean? If I liked, I tended to buy an album if I liked the cover, if I liked the art on the picture. I remember buying the first Eminem album, not the Marshall Mathers one, the one prior that. It's sort of like just purely off picture. What else would I have been listening? Metallica, man. I remember grabbing loads of Metallica just purely off art. I mean, heavy metal art in itself was fantastic. And it was the first time I ever walked into this record shop and going to the counter and going, look, have you got any Insane Clown Posse? And the guy kind of looked at me like, you know who this cult hip-hop band is? And they've been around, 10 years at this particular point. It wasn't new. So this guy was a bit shocked that I was asking this. And the cool thing about it was, it took about 4 weeks, all right? The man, I had to pay the guy. I had to keep the receipt. I remember doing it. I remember back then you used to get, 10 quid pocket money a week or something along the lines of that on a Friday night. And I went down on the Saturday and did this. And I remember, I think it was dead on 10 quid. Right, and I think when it came in, I had to pay an import charge or whatever it was. And this guy ordered it in for me, and it was the great Milico. I can never say that particularly correct. And it's an LP that's in my top 10 favourite LPs still. Okay, great song in there called Piggy Pie. Boom, mate, boom. Listen, go and listen to it. It's great stuff. And do you know what? There was quite a long time where I actually would really want it to be a Juggalo. That's their group of people that 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 follow him. They're cult sort of like people that follow him. It's really, really funny because the Insane Clown Posse has done a lot for the underground hip hop culture, the underground culture in general, because they are embedded in culture, not just in wrestling but in the TV world as well. In the sense of they had an episode based on them in Z Nation. I'm gonna say this. All right, judge me, love me, whatever. Everybody loves Walking Dead, but do you know what? The Z Nation is more my show. Okay, and they had an episode, a great actually episode they got, and this is so firm they are in pop culture. All right, and do you know what? The more interesting thing about them is, before that WWE moment, they had ECW moments. They were involved with. They had a relationship with Sabu and Van Dam, and they did a few deathmatchy based things in ECW. But it wasn't just ECW they were in. They were in WCW as well. Okay, they were in WCW as well. And do you know what the crazy thing about them? They did a bit of everything. And when they were in WCW, they worked in the Deadpool. That was one of Raven's many groups that he did. And they worked with Vampiro. And this is where the links with NWA comes in a bit, in that element. And they had a great few matches. They had a great match against Free Count. Hurricane Helms is sort of group with Tank and stuff like that. The ex-MMA guy. And had a few good matches, a few solid matches, a few class little cheeky matches that were generally good. Okay, all right. And you know what? If you know your stuff, you know your stuff. If you've got the DVD, you got the DVD. If you've seen it on YouTube, you've seen it on YouTube. But the JCW Volume 1, that was a DVD of legend in the early 2000s. It was basically an event they put on themselves, and it continues to come on. And it was such a stacked and insane, crazy card that they had. They had Abdul the Butcher. They had the Rock and Roll Express, probably one of the best tag teams of all time. They had the Iron Sheik there. Do you know what I'm saying? And they had a really, really class little match against Doink the Clowns. All right, and that was Terry the Grey. God, where's my note? And I can't remember the other guy's name. And it was super good stuff. But ICP, all right, they are embedded in pop culture. And they even did my beloved TNA work. They worked in TNA as well. They had a great storyline. It was a bit of a cheeky storyline. It was not a long storyline. They don't get like 6 months concepts in what they do. They more get like 3 months. And they did some stuff with Disco, Young, all right, and Jeff Jarrett. But this moves on to what's happening. NWA 75 is coming up. And we know one of them, ICP, will be there. Okay? All right? Jay will be there. And I think this is one of the great things for pro wrestling, where you had guys like Andy Kaufman, all right? You have guys like Logan Paul. You have guys like Mike Tyson. We have guys like Shaq O'Neal. We have guys like Snoop Dogg, okay, that all make appearances. But the Insane Clown Posse guys are generally fans. And it is going to be something incredibly awesome that's going to go down at NWA 75. If you're not an NWA fan, it's definitely worth watching. It is definitely worth watching as a weekly show. There's great wrestlers like we have Ricky Morton still in there, one of the half the Rock and Roll Express. We have Tyrus. You might know him from the Funkadactyls from WWE. You have guys like EC3, NWA. Not NWA, TNA. He's also NWA, but he's done Ring of Honor stuff. He's worked with the WWE. You have Kerry Morton, and Kerry Morton's Ricky Morton's son, but he is going to be the next big thing. But at NWA 75, there is going to be more Insane Clown Posse representation. And this is exciting stuff. Exciting stuff. But listen, guys, this was a short, cheeky stream on a Sunday night. Okay, I will be back Wednesday with Scholesy Talks Wrestling. I'll be back on Friday with Scholesy Talks Impact Wrestling. But till then, love ya. See you later.